monthly work plan. Just put that up for you guys. So I've been asked to share a little bit about the work plan, the work sample for everybody. So I'm going to pull this up if it's big enough. So this is how we formatted our work plan. It's one of those really funny things that you learn as you apply for all of these awards, that there's nobody telling you exactly how you're supposed to put it together. When you look on the websites, when you look at examples, they all look a little bit different because they're formatted for the web. So you're never seeing anybody's actual work plan. This is how we chose to format it. We just put the information at the top, and then we followed each category as they were asked by the specific Copper Quill. So we started with the need and opportunity, followed by the solution overview, the intended audience. We shared a little bit about our audience, our goals and objectives, implementation and challenges, and then the measurement and evaluation of outcomes. One of the key things that they always talk about with all of the Quill Awards is make sure you have the right font size and the right amount of pages, because if you blow those two things out of the water to begin with, you're never going to win an award. And that's made very, very clear. So keep it to however many pages, keep it to however many point font. Otherwise, you're disqualified no matter how great you wrote, how great your plan was, how great your communications are. One of the key things that I remember from putting together these work samples is that you want to make sure that the judges get a flavor of what you're doing. They don't need to, they didn't need to go to that benefits roadshow to know that you did communications for it and to understand what your attendance was and what your results were from it. The other big thing that we included in ours that I think really helped the judges potentially understand what we were doing was our communication strategy. And this shows kind of where we started from and really what we did. So I've embedded it in here. I can just click through. This is one of our comm strategies. But we talk about all the different things that we're doing. We're very specific at Intel about how we handle all of these things. We put forth our project objectives, audience segmentation, environmental scan, comms objectives, key messages, and show a timeline. So we're looking at it very analytically, which is something that we do often at Intel, which is something that annoys me, but my other Intel colleagues can attest that it works, so that's great. But this also helps keep us organized. So when we're going back to telling the story of the IABC work plan, we make sure that the story is following, the detailed plan that we had before. So is the story that we're telling really the story that happened and that we wanted to be told? Another big thing for our work samples is because we have these digital work samples, so we're submitting them on CDs. Something that's really important, and that we know that another awardee, or somebody who had actually applied for a Copper Quill and Gold Quill, etc., got dinged on severely, was they couldn't read or understand the digital material that was presented. So we saw that as a challenge and an opportunity. So I know this is really small again, I apologize. But we included, as part of our physical work sample, a table of contents to let the judges know what they were going to see, what it would visually look like to them, and all the different pieces of the work sample that they needed to go through. So they didn't have just a disk full of files and had to navigate them. So that I think was really important. So I'm going to show, I don't know if there's audio in here or not, but I'm going to show two different pieces of our work sample so you guys can get a little bit of a flavor. This one right here is going to be a walkthrough of our social media site, Planet Blue. So for example, let's say you do something on your intranet site and you don't know that you can give access to somebody else to view it for judging. One of the things that they recommend is to do a walkthrough, which is be able to show the judges what they're missing, but also what you've been able to create. This is a tip that we got from one of our mentors, and it's tell your story. Tell all of it. So imagine like you're telling the story of whatever the communication that you're doing, whether it be a creative process, an internal comms campaign like we have here, but go through and tell that whole story like you're telling it to a stranger, telling it to your mother, and write that all out. That way you have the complete story from start to finish, and you can go and you can edit out what you need and what you don't need. Additionally, if you're applying for other awards such as the Gold Quill or Silver Quill, you may want to take out and use different sections in the different awards. But that way you already have that content written. Next thing is answer each question as written. The work plan for each Quill Award spells out what the judges want to know and in what order. Don't stray from this, no matter how tempting it is, how much better you think that you are at telling the story in your order, because that's what they're trying to judge you against. And judges, you're welcome to say anything negative to what I say. Something that I said before, assume your audience knows nothing about your field or industry or tools. So PR isn't internal communications. Not everyone knows social media. Company jargon and acronyms are not your friends. So imagine that the person judging you doesn't necessarily know anything about your specific area, because they may not. The next tips, learn how you'll be scored. By knowing what information matters to the reviewers, you'll be able to ensure that they get the information that they need. So I know that they'll have the scoring criteria, and you can say, do I answer, it'll say, how well does this do that? And you say, does my thing answer that? If no, then figure out how you can answer that. Another great thing that we learned at Intel was interview folks to get the full picture. So basically talk to your communication peers. So talk to the people that you were working with on the project, and also talk to some of the people that project impacted, because likely they're going to be the ones who share those shining moments with you, who can tell you, well, this really stood out to me as the most influential, or I saw this as, a different piece of it. And I think that was really interesting for us to learn, and to know how we impacted other people as opposed to just how we perceived it. Never underestimate the work sample. So the work sample is a chance to show how you took your plan from idea to action. Make sure your judges are as loud as your audience is. There typically aren't work samples shown out there for the Quill Awards. And this is something where you say, oh my gosh, I don't know if what I'm doing is the bottom of the barrel, or do I need to spend a lot of time on it? Just ensure that it shares your story as well as you think that it should. Make sure it's a good representation of what you do, because the work sample is just as much work and is counted at a similar level as that work plan. SWWC. So this was something one of my middle school teachers would always write on our essays when we would come in with the first draft. So what, who cares? And this is something that I've applied from middle school all the way until post-grad, and now I'm working. Ensure that the content you present is 100% relevant to know. If you're reading something and you're going on and waxing poetic about, how your style is great or how you're so special, is that relevant to this particular award plan? Does it make sense? Does it matter? Is it taking up valuable real estate for something else that you might want to share? So that's, I think, is probably my biggest takeaway. Also, block out plenty of time to do this. I'm a big procrastinator. I know there's other procrastinators in the room. This is a marathon, not a sprint. If you try and do it in a short period of time, not only are you going to get burned out, but you're not going to be presenting the best representation of the goodness that you've spent all this time doing. And you really should, be proud of yourself and be proud of what you're doing. Finally, get a peer editor. So an award entry is not the time for errors. You may have noticed there was a spelling error in the previous thing that I did. I used of instead of off. So, things like that, probably not the best thing to have happen to you in a giant, something that you're submitting to either the Copper Quills or even anything else. So don't let the judges get distracted by a messy work plan or a messy work sample. That's not what you want. And they do write comments about your grammatical errors, as I have seen. So don't let them get distracted. Don't let the educator in them potentially get the best of you. And just enjoy yourself. So that's all I got. Thank you.
I am Laura from Alison Partners, which they introduced me. We are a national public relations agency with offices all over the country. And my work at the agency is I work with several clients, including Best Western, ERA Real Estate, and Sea Life Arizona. And so for Sea Life Arizona, we were lucky to win an award of excellence for media relations, and then, as Megan mentioned, the 2011 IABC Phoenix Best of the Copper Quills Award. So our award application stood out above a lot of the others last year. So what we did for Sea Life Arizona is we actually took them from groundbreaking to grand opening, and every milestone event in between. So that was with groundbreaking, our tunnel arrival, our water fill, our fish arrival, and then finally the grand opening. My slides are a little text heavy as well. I want to actually walk you through section by section what our award application looked like, and then share some of our best practices or what we've learned from it. Leslie mentioned some of these same things. Be considerate of your judges. They're going to be judging a ton of entries. So keep it to the format, keep it to the font size, very important. And then also, be kind to your judges and be a storyteller. And I think Leslie mentioned this as well. You guys are professional communicators. You can engage them as readers as well and make your story interesting and, put together something that's not necessarily very dry. I think that makes for a good tip as well. And then stick to the page limit. 3 pages is not a lot of space to tell your story, but it's really important that you stick with that. So for need and opportunity, this is your summary. This is actually our need and opportunity that we submitted. It's your only chance to make a first impression. So sum up what you're going to tell them. Don't assume that the judge knows your industry or your client or your company or what you did. So keep it simple for them. All right. The next one is the overview. So again, don't assume that they know what you're talking about. And this is a chance for you to show a clear understanding of the business and trends, and also to showcase some of the research that you did. And I think a lot of people, especially in the agency world, think, oh, we didn't do any research, what are we going to showcase here? But there's a lot of research that you did. So for Sea Life Arizona, we included a media audit, and we actually included quotes from the media audit that we did. We were provided market research from the client that we actually used to shape our plan. We also looked at past grand openings for the same aquariums around the world and what worked well and what didn't work well. And then, this is especially true for agencies, a lot of times you're pitching business and you're writing proposals for business, and you do a lot of research during that process, so don't be afraid to use that same research again. And because we actually proposed the business for this project, we were able to take a lot of the research we did then and put it into our work plan. And so this is just a pull quote from our overview. You can see we actually included that quote from a local television reporter. But we used the things that we learned from our media audit, we used to shape our work plan. So when he says charity tie-ins are always a good motivator for us, we actually used that with our tunnel arrival, and we collected school supplies for the local school, and that gave it another media hook for us. Intended audience, this is another chance to really showcase the research that you've done. So like I said, we received market research from our client, and we knew what we were going after, and then we were able to look at what we already knew working in this market of how we were going to reach this audience. We actually identified some additional audiences, including the Hispanic audience, including tourists, and the business community. And we had research to back all of that up, because we knew, the percentage of the population here that is consuming media in Spanish. We knew how many tourists are visiting us every single year, and we were able to actually incorporate that into the intended audience. So, goals and objectives. The key here is that they should be specific and measurable. And so I just these are what we put together for our goals and objectives. Wanted to give you an opportunity to see some of these measurable results. So again, I'm kind of speaking from the agency perspective, but I think we all have very solid goals and objectives. We have our internal goals. We know what's realistic for our clients of, how many broadcast hits we're going to get or how many print clips we're going to get. But I think the biggest thing for this is you want to tie it back to those business objectives. So how are you affecting the bottom line for your client or for your company? And so what we found here is we knew what this goal was, to ensure 15,000 guests visit the aquarium from May 14th to May 31st. And that's really important because clients are coming to you for a reason, or your company is investing in public relations or communications or marketing for a reason. And so what is that reason? Work with your teams to find that out, because it's not just to get pretty media hits, or it's not just to have a pretty billboard up. It's actually to drive the business and change the business in some way as well. Implementation and challenges. This is really the fun part, because it's a chance to show off everything that you just outlined in the need, the opportunity, the overview, the audience. How was all of that executed? So this is, you want to talk about your budget, your technical equipment, resources, and especially the challenges. I know for Sea Life we had a challenge with every single milestone event, as you can imagine. In particular, the fish arrival. There was an Icelandic volcano eruption at the same time as the fish arrival, which meant that the fish weren't going to arrive on time. But we had already, sent out the media alert for the fish to be coming to the aquarium. So how do you coordinate with the journalists? How do you actually turn that challenge into a positive situation? For us, it resulted in a front page placement in the Business Journal about businesses that were being affected by the volcanic eruption. But we also had to make sure that we were including messaging that this wasn't going to delay the grand opening in any way. We didn't want that message out in the market. We didn't want people afraid that the grand opening was going to be delayed. And then, of course, resist the urge to include every single detail. Especially with Sea Life, we did so much for them over the period of 6 months that we wanted to include every single detail and every creative idea that we put together, but there just wasn't space. So we had to keep it, very top level, very, here's what we did, here's how it helped match up to our objectives and our business goals. Measurement. This is actually the best part because this is how you get to talk about how you actually met all of the goals and objectives that you outlined earlier. I think the best way to do this section is to actually just restate the objectives and then match up with the actual results. And you want to make sure that those results are reflecting what you wrote about in the original strategy and plan. And so I just put a sample. Ours was actually much, much longer. But you can see here, that we've surpassed our goals, which doesn't always happen. But you don't have to just stick to, ensure 15,000 guests visit the aquarium from May 14th to May 31st. We had 40,000 guests. But then we also had media coverage supporting the pre-sales of 16,000 tickets. We had this one here, 2,000 tickets were pre-sold solely from public relations efforts, so before there were any other ads in the market, before any other materials went out, 2,000 tickets were pre-sold. So I think, work with your company, work with your clients, these numbers are there, they're tracking these things, and it's really important to reflect that in your award application. And again, it's just, how does this impact the bottom line? And that is all I have, but I did want to say that Leslie did a great job of pointing out work samples and what you can do with work samples. For Sea Life Arizona, I think it's really important. We went beyond clips. It wasn't just, here are the media hits that we got for them. We also included our plans. We included visuals. Sea Life is a really visual place to go visit, so it was, we wanted to illustrate that when we did the water fill and we invited the local homeless school out to actually do a bucket brigade and fill the tanks up with water, we illustrated that with photos. And then you can also put in, materials that you develop, press releases, media alerts, all of that. That's all I have. I would say again, so for example, a feature story, right? And I'm going to use another client example with Best Western. We secured a feature story in The Economist, actually on their online travel blog. And when we put together an award application for that particular clip, we still tied it back to the business goals. Why was this a target publication for us? Why was it important that we reach this audience? And what were the ultimate goals of having this particular feature story? Why do we want to go after that? What are our ultimate goals to drive, business travelers to Best Western hotels? So I think you still want to think in terms of the overall business picture and why those tactics are supported. In this case, we didn't really need to tie it in, but in other award applications we've done, we've actually used social media for media relations, working with journalists that way, and then also promoting our media relations through social media channels.
Yeah, for the overall, so I can speak on this and then some other stuff that we did, but for the overall annual enrollment, social media was considered one of our main channels and one of our main tactics. At the same time, you'll notice that we actually did a separate award application for all of our social media efforts, because at the end of the day, that becomes so complex and such a big strategy with similar goals. But as you look at the social media, when we did prepare that actual application, and maybe this was potentially to our detriment or not, it really it tied up back to, like we were saying, back to those business goals. So what were you trying to achieve? Well, the business goals were trying to achieve, 60% of our population to move to X health plan. And whereas social media is a really great tactic and we use it, can we effectively measure how well that worked up against our, our print campaign or in-person roadshows? I can't tell you exactly how much of social media influenced that, but what I can tell you is how many people accessed it, what the sentiment was when we evaluated it. So it's a little tricky to marry those things and those ideas, because the ROI on social media isn't necessarily apparent. And for another thing that we did one on culture shift. So how do you measure a feeling? You can't. But you can have a good sense and a good idea, and if you back that up with as much data as you possibly can to link it, and if that linkage makes sense to you and sense to somebody else you sanity check it with, I think that can work for you as well.
And go beyond data, because if you have emails from employees that are saying how great this program was for them, or if you have people on social media calling out your company talking about what you did, you can use those as work samples as well.
Yeah, I think the way I closed one of our entries was with a quote from a very senior manager that said, this is great because it shows how we can use this in a very effective way in other campaigns and for other things that we're doing, and not just benefits related ways, like as a way to engage our employee population. So that's obviously internal.